Hi and welcome to Shorts in Psychology. In this video, I'll go over a couple of tips that will help you to tackle those tricky tests and exam questions. So when determining how to answer a particular question, what should you look for? Firstly, check how many marks the question is worth, as this will tell you how much information your answer should contain. Secondly, what lead-in verb is being used. This is important too, as it affects how you will frame up your answer. Highlighting or underlining keywords will also help you to correctly interpret the question and answer it effectively. Any question that simply requires you to identify or state something will usually be worth 1 mark only. Therefore, make sure you're not writing more than a word or two. If more depth is required, the question will be worth at least 2 marks. Each well-described idea is worth 2 marks. So a 4-mark question is 2 ideas well described, 6 marks is 3, and so on. The highest mark allocation that is used is 8 marks, so you could be asked to describe up to 4 connected ideas, although this is rare. Let's illustrate this with an example. If we look at this past exam questions from the learning topic, part A is worth 2 marks. So one well-described idea about why the scenario illustrates stimulus generalization is required. For example, stimulus generalization refers to a process where a conditioned response occurs in response to the presentation of other similar stimuli, not just the conditioned stimulus. In this case, Luke's phobia extends to many flying insects, not just bees. Part B is worth 6 marks, therefore 3 connected points about how systematic desensitization can be used is required. For example, the first point could relate to how Luke would be taught relaxation strategies, followed by a description of how a hierarchy of fear is established, which Luke is then progressively exposed to. As mentioned earlier, the lead-in verb used is also important, as it indicates how to frame up your answer. Some commonly used lead-in verbs include state, name, identify, describe, discuss, define, and explain. Let's explore some of these in a bit more detail. For state and name questions, you simply need to specify what it is, hence these are usually only worth 1 mark. For example, in this state question, the answer is simply phobia. If the question uses the word identify, it means that you have to recognize and name a feature from a set of data, a graph, or a scenario. For example, in this question, the independent variable needs to be identified. As the answer is still only meant to be 1 or a few words, identify questions are also usually only worth 1 mark. Distinguishing the difference between what is required for a describe versus a discuss question can be tricky. Describe questions involve giving characteristics, accounts, or features of what is happening. Therefore, these sorts of questions are worth at least 2 marks. For example, in this question, you have to describe one disadvantage of the experimental investigation design. Discuss questions, on the other hand, usually involve examining a topic by presenting arguments for or against a statement or point of view. For example, in this question, you have to discuss an ethical issue which is relevant to a particular case study. In contrast, questions that use the word define do not require a description. Instead, you need to clearly state the meaning of the word, phrase, or term. For example, defining impression management requires you to explain what it is. It is the process by which people attempt to control the impressions they are making on others. It is not to just provide examples such as discussing verbal and non-verbal cues. If the question asks you to explain, you need to give reasons to account for the given statement, the results, or your answer. For example, one reason why a researcher would prefer to use a large number of participants is because it minimizes error due to chance and increases the reliability of the results. It also overcomes problems with generalizing results caused by wide variation. Lastly, highlight or underline keywords to ensure you stay on track with your answer. Just make sure you are selective about what you highlight or underline. Some keywords or phrases to underline could include the lead-in verb, as well as keywords relating to the context or scenario, or how many aspects or examples need to be discussed. Some of the keywords in this question include the fact that you have to use the data in the graph, which tells you that you need to make sure you include specific figures. Also, 2 aspects of sleep change need to be described, and then these need to be for the ages of birth to 15 years, so you need to ignore the other ages shown on the graph. Based on these keywords, the answer could look like this. Newborns spend approximately 6 hours in REM sleep, as compared to 15-year-olds who spend approximately 1.5 hours in REM. Newborns also have a total sleep of 16 hours, whereas 15-year-olds have a total sleep of 9 hours. You could also substitute one of these points with a point about the difference in non-REM sleep for newborns versus 15-year-olds as well. A couple of reminders to finish off. Firstly, if a scenario is provided, make sure your answer is in context, as generic answers will generally achieve no more than half of the marks. Make sure you also stick to the question. It can be tempting to over-answer a question when you have spent a lot of time studying and are keen to do well. However, there are no bonus marks for additional information, so this just wastes valuable time. There is also a negative marking scheme built into the short answer section, so over-answering could also have an unintended negative impact on your grade. For example, if you are asked to describe one difference between REM and non-REM sleep, and you give 2 differences where one is right and one is wrong, you will end up receiving 0 marks overall. So don't try and hedge your bets by providing extra answers. I hope that this video helps you to interpret and answer exam standard questions, and as always, thanks for listening.